Askreddit, people who separated, divorced within 1 year of getting married, when did you know it was a mistake? She went out for girls' night and met a new friend named Nicole at a bar. Started texting her a lot, then going to hang out now and then. We had a baby at home and she kept trying to go hang out with this girl from another town over with no last name whom I was not allowed to meet. His real name was Wesley. And here I thought she was just going to turn out to be a lesbian. A couple of weeks into our marriage, the sex started to physically hurt. I went to my OB and after a test or two, she informed me I had contracted chlamydia. That's when I knew. Turns out, my newlywed husband had been banging his coworker for months. Hopefully he didn't gaslight you and try to convince you that you had it before and it was dormant, and technically you gave it to him. That happened to one of my friends. Deplorable. Not me, but a friend of mine. They had been married about 6 weeks. She had just moved in when they returned from the honeymoon, and she was rearranging furniture, organizing closets, etc., one day while he was at work. She started pulling some of his boxes down from a closet shelf to make room for her things, and a box fell down accidentally, spilling hundreds of pictures of child porn. Divorced the pedo after reporting him to the military police. They were both in the military. Correct response. When she pulled a knife a month in, I still stayed for a full year like an idiot. Not an idiot, glad you got out. Relationships can make your brain do the craziest mental gymnastics to justify all the bullshit. She decided she was in love with her step-brother a month after we got married. I'm pretty sure I watched a preview of a scene with the same plot line last night. When I caught my new bride having a workplace affair while I was receiving cancer treatments. It was not a pleasant time for me. Edit, holy crap, woke up to an awful lot of really nice notes. Thank you everyone and to those who gifted silver and gold. I am going to try to respond directly to some folks but I will say this here, this happened about 25 years ago. Yes, I am an old guy. It really sucked at the time. The day I found out I was a few months into both a major surgery and then daily radiation treatment, I was down to about 118 from my normal 155 pounds. But, as it turned out, it was really a good thing. We did not have a house or kids and the divorce was rather simple. I went on to get married again and have 3 incredible kids I would never have had otherwise. The entire experience taught me a lot about the power of forgiveness. Admittedly, it took me too long to learn this lesson, and I have a pretty great life today. If you are currently going through something similar, please know that life can and does get better. Smiley face. Thank you all again and, while I watched Breaking Bad, I really never made the connection to me so many of these comments have me laughing out loud. Edit number 2, so we tried the whole marriage counseling thing after I caught her. The marriage counselor, however, was my wife's personal therapist. We had one meeting and the therapist asked to meet with me privately. She subsequently reported to my wife, Nika seems to have a lot of anger, ya think. I had just lost over 20% of my body weight, I was still going through treatments, and I found out my wife of less than a year was sleeping with a coworker, lol. Not me but my dad. He got back from his honeymoon and went back to work. He came home and something felt off when he walked in the door. She wasn't there when he got home from work, which was very odd for her since she got off work earlier than him and was always home when he got back. When she got back he mentioned that it was out of the ordinary that she had been out and asked if she went somewhere. He wasn't accusatory, just curious because it never happened, but she dodged his questions at first. Eventually after he got suspicious of her dodging a simple question, she admitted that she'd quit her job, and when he asked why, she said she didn't need to work. So she was planning on using him as her cash cow. He doesn't remember how the conversation went exactly since it was 30 years ago. He tried counseling and asked her to get her job back but she always brushed him off and never took him seriously. He threw in the towel 7 months later and she started trying to fix things, but it had been 7 months of him trying to fix things and she had no interest. So he filed for divorce and went on to achieve his lifelong dream. He dated and then married his middle school crush, my mom. 28 years strong. Edited to add since a lot of people were asking for clarification. Thank you for the silver and my first ever gold, kind strangers. I like this one the best. I'm ending here on a high note. Edit, thank you to whoever gave me gold and silver. I love that this is my top comment. My Mill got married the first time when she was really young. Left him a month later. Turns out he was a raging alcoholic. She had no idea because her family was super overprotective and they were never really allowed to spend time together alone before they got married. Who knew spending time with someone could be the key to knowing if they are a good partner? And this is why I plan to live with my partner for at least a year or so before getting married. I want to know what the hell I'm getting into before we're stuck together. Edit. To the people saying more than a year is better, I completely agree, I'm just saying that's my absolute bare minimum. Less than a year into actively trying to get pregnant he got discouraged, gave up and started staying out until 4:15 a.m. with his coworker. He posted selfies on her couch on Snapchat and even went as far as asking her to marry him once he could get rid of me. He had 2 biological children, my step-children, that he abandoned at home with me while he was out doing this. The icing on the cake was that on my favorite holiday, while holding my brand new baby nephew in front of his entire family, he told me he wanted a divorce. I was gone in 2 weeks, left everything to him, and vanished. New number, new address, everything. Best choice I ever made. Jesus, he really believed that was the time to announce divorce? I hope his entire family was pissed at him too. I'm glad you're away from him now. A cousin of mine divorced her husband after 6 months. She knew when we had to pick her up from her home after having been recently beaten. That day, we packed up all of her stuff and never let her go back. I'm happy that you guys could be there for her and help her get out. Hope she is doing well now. A cousin of mine married someone who seemed like the perfect woman. They worked in the same store together, and he would brag about how his wife was getting promoted quickly in the company. A few months into the marriage, she tells him she's going out with friends for the evening. An hour or so later, my cousin gets a call from one of his friends. The friend saw her having dinner in a restaurant with the manager of the store that they both worked at. Once he confronted her about it, that was basically the end of the marriage. This was similar to a friend of mine. His wife spent years trying to alienate him from his friends. After they got married, they bought a house near his job. She decided she didn't like the commute to her job, even though it was practically the same, and started staying at her parents'. Friend finds out from her parents she hasn't been staying there. Turns out she was going out and partying with coworkers, then staying with an ex. Her running off with a guy she met in rehab was a pretty solid clue that it wasn't meant to be. Amy too. Luckily we were not married but 5-year relationship. Honeymoon. We dated for 5 years, but on the honeymoon we had a big argument over my liberal use of sunscreen. She refused to wear any because of chemicals, and I liberally use it due to my ginger skin. We seriously argued over this for a good hour and she refused to even go into the pool with me because of sunscreen chemicals. After a scuba adventure with her she could hardly walk because she got sunburnt on her legs whereas my skin didn't change. She then tried to convince me that it was all my fault because I didn't force her to wear the sunscreen and that the honeymoon was ruined. It was then I realized I picked the wrong person. After a few more psycho arguments, mad at me because of something in her dreams, mad because I didn't remind her to bring an umbrella, I had to call it quits. I can't stay with someone who constantly blames me for their own problems. Luckily no kids and I got back everything I brought into the marriage. I've gotta know, how did you date for 5 years and not have those sort of arguments tip you off? Or was getting married and still having those arguments sort of a tip off? Day after we got engaged. He changed. Then he uninvited my family to the wedding, said they would take my attention away from him. We lasted 3 months, and then I ran and hid. Edit. To everyone who is asking, then why did you marry him then? I totally get that question. Here is the answer, I felt worthless. So when you grow up feeling worthless, and a partner says, yeah, you are worthless, and everyone can see that, but you know what? I will love you anyway, you jump on that shit like it's the last living plant in a nuclear wasteland. I didn't leave because I honestly believed it was either him or suicide. I left because he was killing me anyway and I decided it would be less painful to just die on my own. Then I lived. I hear this question a lot. If you ask someone why they stay, it's because you don't understand the trauma they are experiencing. That means you are lucky, in that regard. Be careful with this shaming question. It is a part of our trauma. He uninvited your family? What the frack? I'm so glad you got away. Sending internet cheers from somewhere across the globe. The next morning I woke up and thought, when would be a socially acceptable time to get divorced? In hindsight, that says miles about why I felt I had to get married. 10 years seems pretty reasonable. I could probably last 10 years, couples counseling within 6 months, separated within the year, shitstorm of a divorce and finally free 2 years after that. Would I do it all over again? I'm sure it took years of my life, but I learned so many invaluable lessons about myself along the way. Take care of yourself first, kids. Put that oxygen mask on before you help anyone else. I actually knew before, I was just too scared to do anything about it. Same. I convinced myself it was pre-wedding jitters. He is an extremely good man and I wanted to want it in him. When I found out he had $500K in debt that he hadn't told me about beforehand. Yes, we had a prenup. He just lied about it on the prenup. I don't know anything about prenups, but would that invalid it? She nearly killed me because she thought I was cheating from some texts that went to my mother. Dude, maybe don't send dick pics to your mom. The day after the wedding, when he poked me in the chest and said, "You're going to do what I say whether you like it or not." Big mistake. This happened to both my aunt and my mother-in-law. Husbands-to-be were sweet as pie and super caring, totally charming, etc. Day of the wedding, after they say, "I do," it was like a literal light switch. I believe they both said something along the lines of, "You're my property now and you'll do as I say," and when they didn't they were beat for it. I am so glad they both got out, but it took my aunt 5 years I believe, and my mother-in-law 10. The day after we got married, when he slapped me across the face, hard and completely out of the blue. No argument, no conversation leading up to it, nothing. He said it wasn't that hard of a hit, he was just kidding around, and I was being overdramatic. He had never gotten violent with me while dating, but as soon as we got married it was like a switch flipped and he was a completely different person. It got worse very quickly, and I ended up filing for divorce 73 days after we got married. That reminded me of the scene in It, book version, when Bev's husband slaps her as a test to see what he can get away with. "I'm glad you escaped quickly." When he said my son's suicide attempt interfered with his ex's birthday party. Excuse me, what the fuck? Knew before we even got married. Spoke about how I thought it didn't feel right with my family a couple months before the big day, but was told it was just cold feet and we'd be fine after the wedding. Almost a year later I was still miserable, so I left. Was an absolute shit storm, but so worth it. My dad made a big deal when my siblings and I were each engaged that, if we weren't sure about going through with it, we could call it off at any time. Even in the back of the church when the ceremony was starting, he checked with us to verify we still wanted to do it. I always knew I wanted to go through with it, but it's still nice to really know it was my decision and not something I was pushed into. And I know plenty of people who weren't really sure but felt like it was too late to change their mind. Not me, but my brother, and I think seeing her on top of her boss did the trick. Edit, kinda blew up, so first thanks for silver, and he catched them because we had to come back early from a trip. Lost a fair bit of money in the divorce but no kids or pets, so he's mainly happy to be done with her. Relationship wasn't a very happy one. She was just trying to get a raise. Got married in late May. By August or September I found out from my dad that my husband, now ex, and my brother's wife were sexting. She was also my bridesmaid at our wedding. She felt guilty and told my dad, who had to tell me. I forgave him like a dingus, and about a year and a half later I found pictures of him sucking 2 different dicks in our house and also wearing quite a bit of my nice makeup. All of this after we moved to Washington from Florida. It's been wild. We're obviously divorced now. Edited for clarity, since I guess that needed to be said. A Florida man will remain a Florida man no matter where he's moved. Edit, thanks for the gold. My brother died a week after the wedding, and after about 2 months, he told me that was just too big of a thing to happen in the beginning of a marriage. I tried for 6 more months and then just gave up. I'm sorry about your brother. I'm sorry your husband wasn't supportive. That's kind of a dick move, to say, your grief is too much of a drag for me, but it sounds like you weren't a great match in the first place. Not me, but my cousin and her husband met at work. Both independent and career-focused. When they got back from the honeymoon, he immediately started treating her like his mom and told her she would need to give up work to look after the house. No talk of that before the wedding at all. I think they lasted 4 weeks married. As my grandmother once told me, love is blind, but marriage sees 20/20. Not me but a female friend knew approximately 4 to 6 weeks into marriage. Her husband at the time basically spent a few years prior to marriage being a bit of a salesman to everyone. Once they got behind closed doors, his traditional marriage roots really came out. They both had fast-moving careers, and while he was okay with her making money and having a career, he also expected her to cook, clean, take care of the dogs, etc., and never lifted a finger. He would just come home and pound drinks until dinner time. This is a good reason why you should live with someone before you get married to them. It's a trial period where you learn a lot about the other person. Not me, but a cousin. Me and my family were at her wedding reception sitting outside on a deck. My cousin comes out to sit with us for a bit and pulls out a pack of cigarettes. Her first words were, "Please don't tell him I smoke." They moved to California a few weeks later and divorced within a week of being there. Should mention they were engaged before she got out of high school. Dude probably knew she smoked. That stink permanently attaches to everything. Girl I know. 1 month in she found out he cheated the day of the wedding. Damn, that sucks. If only someone had chimed in with a, "Haven't you people ever heard of closing the goddamn door?" When I was in Iraq and she posted a picture on Facebook of her and another guy laying in bed together, it was obvious that they had just hooked up. Don't get married to fix relationships, pro-life tip. Seriously? So she didn't care if you saw it? That's so fracked up. I knew it was a mistake about 2 months into our engagement. I actually broke up with her for a week but didn't tell anyone other than my parents. Something just didn't feel right. She ended up begging me every single day and I just felt really bad and got back with her. We pretended like it never happened. Got married 9 months later and she ended up cheating on me a little over a year into our marriage. I still don't fracking understand her logic behind all that, but whatever. It's done and I've moved on, but I'll never understand why she wanted me back so badly and did that not even 2 years later. Edit. Geez, thanks guys and gals for the kind words and chats. If you're going through a rough patch, it does get better. One day at a time. I've remarried and we're planning on starting a family soon. Would have never imagined rebuilding after what happened with my ex. Keep the faith and things will turn around. I doubt she even knows why she did it herself. Don't waste time thinking about it. I'm glad you've moved on. I got married shortly after tech school. About 4 months after. We made plans for her to move from NC to TX to join me, as I am in the military and can't move. 3 times I brought it up, 3 times she said she just needed more time to move, finally the 4th time she said she couldn't leave her friends and family to move across the country to start our lives together. A year later, we were divorced, or well, I divorced her. She obviously didn't come down to Texas for that, signed a waiver of citation to not get any news about it, so I basically got to divorce myself, which, after hearing how vindictive ex-spouses can be, I chalk that up to a blessing. You got married while you lived 2,000 miles away from each other? I feel like the red flag would have been that after the wedding you went different directions, not 4 months later. That's a shitty situation. Sorry bud. Not technically within a year, but when I returned from my first deployment, 10 months, I found out she had been sleeping with 3 of my buddies. Told her to pack her shit and get the frack out. Jody, Brody and Cody strike again. I commend every single one of you who got out within the year. I knew my husband was shit during that time too, but my dumbass put up with him for over 10 years because I wanted to try and make it work. Good job, guys. God, I'm reading these stories thinking the exact same thing, and I only got out after just under 2 years of marriage, 8 years together. I hope you are living a better life now. I had been fooling around with this girl for a while. I never wanted anything serious, and I knew that from the start. Then my mom was killed, I went into a deep depression and this girl was there for me. Her mom had died of cancer about a year earlier and I guess we really bonded over that. It pushed us much further emotionally than we ever should have gone. We ended up doing a courthouse marriage. I knew within the month that I had fracked up. But I didn't want to just give up and get divorced. Once the emotions of my mom's death passed, I realized how toxic she really was. She was an incredibly unstable person and ended up just taking me into an even deeper depression. We divorced about a year ago, after being married for about 10 months, and I was immediately much happier. Marriage shouldn't be taken lightly, but people also shouldn't force themselves to be in unhealthy relationships. We all make mistakes. Don't waste your life with someone that doesn't deserve you. When I lost my dad unexpectedly, someone told me that I shouldn't make any big life decisions for at least a year. I can totally see how if the right-wrong situation presented itself, all of those crazy emotions that come with grief could easily lead you into a bad decision. I hope you're doing better now. It never hurts less, but it starts to hurt less often. Not me, but my sister. She didn't see anything wrong with him moving to another state and her staying at my parents' house and only seeing her husband when she flew to visit. He was in the army. Didn't see a problem when girls would post Instagram and Facebook photos of her husband drunk off his ass at a party when he told her he was at work. Didn't see a problem when he made huge purchases, a sports car, a four-wheeler, that they couldn't afford without telling her. Didn't see a problem when he told her she should get breast implants during sex. Nope, never saw a problem. She didn't realize it was a mistake until he sent her divorce papers. They were married less than a year. I for one wasn't surprised. I tried to tell her a marriage that started with a proposal when both parties were in relationships with different people was doomed to fail, but she didn't listen. Also, yes, this is real, I'm not making it up, I wish I were. Edit. So interesting that most of these responses are saying how stupid my sister is. No one is talking about how much of a terrible person my ex-brother-in-law is. Yes, there's an accountability and she should have been more aware, but he's the one who did the horrible shit. She was just in love. For everyone listening, always remember this simple fact: what someone will do for you, they will just as readily do to you. Before we even got married, I never wanted kids and never wanted to get married, which he knew. Lo and behold, I got pregnant. He wanted to keep the baby. I had no health insurance, so we got married. Love my daughter to death, but getting married was the worst mistake of my life, and I knew before we got married that we were doing it for the wrong reasons. P.S. to the ladies out there, never trust a guy when he says his doctor told him that he's infertile because he has slow swimmers. I was stupid enough to believe him. Holy shit, he convinced you to go without a condom and lied about being infertile? I know you don't need anyone to tell you this, but that's seriously fracked up. Friend of mine. Very religious couple never had sex before marriage. Told H she was gay 2 weeks before their 1 year. I want this to be told her she was gay. That would be the start of a good joke, I bet. Subscribe. Or don't. I don't care.